Hello, lovers. Welcome to another episode of the Venus Embodiment series. Today we have Hugh as our Venus in Sagittarius astrologer. Hi, Hugh.
Hey Shahir, how are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I am doing this with you today. I'm in a Venus year. I'm embarking on a collaborative astrology project to witness the laughter loving queen Venus through the different signs and life experiences of astrologers living with her. In hopes that through these exchanges of the experiential Venusian embodiments and insights, the project would help others with similar Venus signs, houses placement maybe, and aspects, planetary rulership. We're having our first Jovian ruled Venus, like Jove ruled Venus here. So to feel seen and celebrated for their own personal Venus placement too, or that of their loved ones, because that's such an important thing. So I am Shahir. I am a love devotee. I am a queer Muslim brown mystic who believes in love in everything, and everything is love. I'm also a practicing astrologer, spirit guide connector, and a tarot reader. So I welcome you, Hugh Tran. How would you like to describe yourself as?
I didn't like set in a bio because things were kind of in transition, but I'm an astrologer. A lot of people in the community also know me as a designer. I've worked on several different projects in the astrology space, particularly Astro Twitter. So I've worked with a few fellow colleagues and astrologers, helping them with branding for their own practice, as well as
Mm.
the logo for the Celestial Arts Education Library, which is a library run by Jens Art and a few other people.
Oh
Um,
wow, I did not know that you're that too.
I know Olympia, Washington. It's like a physical space, I believe, that's being set up. And yes,
Yes.
I had the honor to work on that project.
Oh
I
wow.
previously on the board of Aya as their design director for a year and a half, I believe. And like it's just super excited to be here and talking about Venus.
Oh, oh my God. I love that. I love that. And you are, I mean, I know you through the lens of like designer slash astrologer. That's always like, oh my God, Hugh is like one of those aestheticians, I feel, it's like the aesthetics. All right, so let's start with introduction of your basics, your rising sign, your moon or your sun, and your sun, and where is Venus located for you?
Yeah, so I am a Sagittarius rising. So that means
Hey.
that Venus is in my first house, along with
Yes.
Mars, Pluto. So you just have like, those three planets there. My sun is in Libra and my moon is in Aquarius.
Oh my God. Wow. It's very like, yeah, it's very airy and fiery just from that
I
that that tree
basically don't have any
configuration.
nocturnal placements. Like besides Neptune, but that doesn't count.
Oh my God. Okay. All right.
Everything
So
is diurnal. So if you want to know about like diurnal signs, just talk to me.
it's kind of bizarre too that I mean synastry wise I'm like exposing myself here, but literally your Venus, and you have Venus and Pluto in the first house in a very early degree Sag, and that's where my ascendant is. So it's like it's kind of like a
Awesome.
timely thing that I'm also like interfacing with you right now and kind of just like learning more about that Venus on
Love that.
where it's located particularly for you. So my first question for all astrologers in this series is that, yeah, what and who is Venus to you today? And how is your relationship with the archetypal Venus overall? And then later on, perhaps you could also explain how does Venus in Sagittarius in particular collaborates with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I so my relationship with Venus today, I would say that I, I can't ignore Venus just because like it's just so a part of who I am and just everything that I do. So Venus is also like my midheaven ruler, and it's like something we just like very talked about, like not on like the recording, but just I for the longest time I had thought because of my birth time I had thought that I was like a Virgo rising. I mean a Virgo
Mm-hmm.
sun. And a lot of things that I used to associate with like those late degrees of Virgo, I realized it's like, oh, I'm actually just a Libra, like a Libra midheaven. So it makes a lot more sense that way. But I think, yeah, I think essentially Venus is unavoidable. I think everything, at the end of the day, I look at the motivations behind, who I am, the way that I move about the world. Everything is just Venus. So I guess what is
Mm.
Venus? Like finding relationality, I think ultimately is just a big part of what Venus does. And I think as an artist, I think like that's like is um, a term that I've associated with myself for a very long time. I was very comfortable with the title of artist because it felt natural when I first discovered it. I was like, oh, I'm a person that loves to create, that loves to see beauty in the world and wants to enact that in the world, and
Mm.
hence it like informed the things that I wanted to study. And despite having been raised in like a more like traditional context and like knowing that like I was like had all this pressure to go into like STEM and all this stuff. I was like, well, I want to be an artist. I want
Oh my God.
to like creative things that I wanted to draw. And so I guess that was like a long-winded way of saying, yeah, like I can't avoid Venus. Everything I do is revolved around beauty and creating and caring about the other, because I think that Venus has multiple expressions to her. Like it's not just I guess, where am I going with this? Sorry, Mercury is in Sag, and I have so
Like,
many.
what is the story here?
It's like I think essentially what I'm trying to say is that like Venus, there are multiple sides to her. There's like you're creating beautiful things, or are you an enjoyer of beautiful things? I think this is one of the things that I found really different about the ways that my experience with Venus is may differ from other people. There are a lot of people who really enjoy and are able to um, take in pleasure, and that is still something that I've been working with Venus for most of my life, because I have a Venus Mars Pluto conjunction, most of my
Mm-hmm.
life, and it's very diurnal, it's very active, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I found myself being a person who is more interested in creating the
Mm.
shiny, beautiful thing rather than enjoying it. I've often met people where, and even knowing family members who, like, I know like their Venus is not like mine. They have like a nocturnal Venus, like in Taurus or something like that. And I just found them to have such a capacity to just relax and chill and like just take in the sumptuous, take in the pleasure. And that is something that I've struggled with most of my life. And this is where you get to, my particular Venus placement, which is in Sagittarius. Like if you look at the system of traditional astrology, the system of traditional communities, I would say that Venus isn't particularly dignified in the sign of Sagittarius as compared
Yeah.
to the other Jupiterian sign in Pisces, where she's exalted.
Yeah.
So this is like something I, even as an astrologer, I've had to sit with a lot. Like, what is the fundamental difference between like one Jupiterian sign versus the other? Because it's ruled um, by Jove, by Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
Expansion, wanting. It's a benefic ruled sign, but there's a quality about Sag that I think uh, imparts some qualities that naturally Venus doesn't do well with. And I think one quality
Mm.
is that it is naturally dry, right? It's like
Mm.
a hot and dry sign, like, and along with that Mars, because I found that like the topics of Venus in my chart have always, there is an excitement about
Mm-hmm.
it's imparted with the Jupiterian excitement, but Venus, she it's always like with Sag, is always like looking for the next best thing, right? It's always like
Yeah.
for the next epic thing. So I think like the quality of Venus that wants to keep the relational stable and steady and like connected, it can sever some of the connectivity that Venus naturally wants to impart. Sorry,
Mm.
I'm off doing something in some strange land, right?
I
Uh,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think it's like I love that you begin it with this sense of the difference. It is a bit dry, and it's kind of just like, it is like in the fire sign. It's for me, the imagery that comes up for me, it's like it's also like it's like a runaway Venus. It's like a Venus that's just like on the move
Yeah.
in a way. And like
Peregrine,
I
right?
enjoy this
Peregrine.
relationship, but then I have to go now.
Yeah, totally. Just thinking about like what does it mean to be dignified? Like Venus,
Hmm.
yeah, she's like technically like you said, like runaway. That's like literally what like peregrine just means like foreigner, right? Like
Hmm.
so she is often one way I like to think about my Venus is that she's constantly in search of an adventure buddy.
Yeah.
I think that with Venus and Sag, it imparts in like this kind of wanderlust, expansive quality to Venus. Like I think about like um, it's many and multiple because Venus is still in a mutable sign. So you have I found myself throughout my life being able to um, traverse multiple relationships and multiple groups.
Mm.
Like in high school, so Venus. Thinking about my chart, Venus rules both the sixth house, but also my sectile and midheaven and my angle ruler. Um, so it like in the 11th house, sorry, and so throughout my high school experience, I was like in various like different groups. Like I was a madrigal, so like I sang, I was in dance company, I was like I hung out with like the jocks, hung out with like the nerds. I was with the theater kids. I was just like everywhere, so it's just like constantly. I think like very burnt out because I was doing too much. Like Venus,
Oh my God. I feel like that's very Mars
it's
Venus
very
thing.
Mars. This is Venus
And
Mars.
Pluto in the background for sure too. It's just like that desire to like to find the soul power kind of feeling.
Exactly.
Um yeah.
Just very high
Yeah.
strung. And I realized that, oh, this is one fundamental quality that other Venusians I've noticed exhibit that I definitely do not exhibit. Because I think people like really do associate me with like, oh yeah, that super Venusian, like he makes pretty things. He's a designer, he's like an artist, da da da.
Yeah.
One unspoken aspect of like, I think the artist archetype, especially back then, but even today, in the age of like capitalism and stuff, there's like always an underlying, like there's like the hustle, right? Like so to me,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the conjunction, I can't have my Venus without my Mars, right? Like to me, like there's
Mm-hmm.
they live and have such intimate um intimate exchange all the time that I really can't, I don't know how to Venus sometimes without Mars, which can be problematic,
Yeah.
because they're kind of sometimes they can be quite antithetical to one another's motivations. Like, how do you keep a relationship together but also wanting to sever, right? So,
Yes.
like, Venus and Sag at the end of the day essentially just wants to expand horizons. And I think of like the Chris Brennans because I believe Chris Brennan has like
Mm-hmm.
Sag, like so the Chris Brennans of the world, right? Making connections with everybody, right? And I
Oh
think
my
that
God.
sharing far and wide, and this is
Yeah.
particularly about those first 10 degrees of Sagittarius. That first decan of Sag is so much about proliferation. To me,
Yeah.
that's where my Venus is. So I've my entire life I've wanted to share beautiful things with the world. I've wanted to bring and have my mark upon the world, I guess. And yeah,
Mm.
I think a large part of like that Venus is yeah, just spreading the goodness, spreading the joy.
Yeah.
About
Yeah.
right now, everything the transit in astrology, everything is in Sag. So just this
Yeah.
it's like Christmas season or like the holiday season. So the idea of like spreading cheer, I think that's so core to like especially those early degrees of Sag.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is so true. And I feel like I love that you point out, yeah, the early degrees of Sag is it's almost like I feel like that's one of the fastest card. Like I whenever I corresponded to the tarot major
Eight of
arcana,
Wands,
sorry.
right? The Eight of
Yeah,
Wands.
it's the Eight of Wands. It's literally that's like Eight of Wands is like the spell when you want things to happen quickly, and like I want the information is like in the face of Mercury, right? So it's like It's like, it's swift. Um, so yeah, it's definitely whatever you're reflecting on in terms of that Venus and Sagittarius. So do you feel that, like, I was like looking at your Venus, like, oh my God, it's very angular. And now we just talked about how you discovered recently during the Venus Kazimi that your midheaven is actually Libra too, right? So which kind of like really added that sense of like um pressure to, in a way. I feel sometimes, angular things are just like, it's powerful, but it's also pressure. It's like it's part of like a personal responsibility in a way too, right? In some ways I feel. And so for you, do you feel do you feel like you're caught, like, when how, like, if you're not creating things, you don't feel like you're living, right, in a way?
Yeah, yeah, no, it really does feel like that because, again, you have this really tight application of my Venus to Mars, which is my fifth house ruler, which is like the
Mm-hmm.
creativity and production and kids, so I really do feel like my relationship with my art, the things I create in the world, it does have that restlessness and is a
Mm.
very signature to how my Venus expresses itself in my own chart because I've always done art in the context of groups, so like
I
it's like, oh,
see. Oh yeah, that's true.
so my midheaven, so my midheaven being in the 11th house, I was, oh, so you're an artist, but you're a dancer on, like, in a group context, like it's, or like you joined a community, but then all of a sudden you're like some kind of like leadership within the context of the group, right? Because it's like the sun. The sun has
Mm.
a lot to do with leadership. So I've always been like an officer position or some kind of like leader direction.
Mm-hmm.
So you have like the sun quality playing into some of those expressions as well, because the sun is very highly advancing. It's on the advancing side of the angle, so it's like very
Yeah.
from a quadrant based perspective.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, like it's just the constant, oh, this needs to get out. Like sometimes I'll be like trying to sleep in the middle of the night and then wake up because I have like some kind of idea.
Really?
It needs to get out, and then you don't get as much a regular. My sleep cycle has always been really um off the charts. It's very elliptical the way that my sleep patterns work. It's ultimately not good, and it's like something I'm still working with. But it's just like
Oh my God.
constant restlessness to create. I think that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, I do feel there's always that, like, almost like an angst. And I feel like, for me, Sagittarius is always a storyteller, right, in a way too. And so do you feel that part of the inspiration, or the reason for you creating art, is also for storytelling? Is it like, yeah, what would usually, like, what would usually be some of those elements of inspiration that you derive from? I'm curious now.
Yeah, I would say that like that's a huge part of like what um I do as an artist. Like, for example, in my design work, in my everyday life, I really focus on brands.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a lot of brand and identity systems for people, and I think what brand ultimately is being able to create systems to tell a story. Like, if you think about the most popular brands that you interact with, um, the ones that are most successful, it's that really touches to the heart. And I think this is like that Jupiterian quality, that when
Mm-hmm.
you hear your story, you're able to have a level of understanding and intimacy that like you don't get uh, unless you tell them your entire journey. And I think this is like
Mm.
I really love to do in my art, where everything that I do, and this is a really great point that you mentioned, that so much of my art is fundamentally trying to tell a story, is like trying to get people to understand the picture or the bigger journey that
Mm-hmm.
be on, or what is even possible. Because I think that Venus, when she's dancing with such intense planets, she it's like, oh, if Venus is aesthetic, how far can you push the aesthetic? How far can you push what you can do? Um,
Mm.
and that takes martial work. That takes a little bit of obsession. There's been many possibly
The Pluto jumped out, but yes.
like or something like that. And I was like, oh wow, this is like very, very intense. I don't think like, like
Yeah.
this is not, I'm actually experiencing a lot of like I'm pouring blood over this. Right? Like art that takes a little bit of grit, a little bit of blood, a little bit of like
Oh my
sacrifice.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And I do feel, part of that Sagittarian nature is also like, the hunger as well, like, pushing yourself. And I love the idea of like trying to bring it to the limit, right? Which is like very Saturn in a way, but also like even pushing the envelope even more. It's just like, how far can I even go for it? And I think
yeah.
such a Jupiterian curse or blessing. It's just like, oh,
Yeah.
you're already over the edge, but you still want to like, I still want to like push it even more.
Yeah, it's like I think it's definitely trying to always be the epic thing. I think Sag always wants to be the epic thing, like
I
I want to do something epic, like I want. It's like maybe like every single time like I was given like a brief or like given
uh-huh.
given like an assignment or something, and I read like what I had to do. I was like, can't we do this? That'd be more awesome if we did this. like, that's too boring. We need to do this thing, which is bigger and better.
That's true.
I
That's
think
true.
Venus is all my Venus and Sag is constantly searching for the bigger and the better, and how much
Mm-hmm.
to push the bigger and the better, and so,
Mm-hmm.
that really boundary pushing, because like Jupiter says yes. If Saturn says no, it's like, hey, this is the limit. This is the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think Venus and Sag is going to be like, we're gonna push. We're gonna push that. We're gonna if
Oh
you
my God.
can only do that within that amount of time, try me. It's like, I'm ready for it. It's like very like throw yourself in.
I love that.
If Venus is the artist, then I think um, honestly, if Venus is the artist, then Venus and Sag is the artist on the mission, right? It's on
Mm.
journey. And I think there's some really interesting keywords that we can pull from that, because you get like some of the stereotypes with Sagittarius where you have the Jupiterian type, so you have the missionaries, you have those people who are um, trying to spread an ideology.
Mm.
I think that deeply to spread a philosophy, right? And I think ultimately
Mm-hmm.
Venus in Sag loves philosophy, loves to spread ideas, loves to spread ultimately what they see as a fount of hope, right? For me,
Mm.
I've always wanted to. I didn't always have resources for my art. When I was a dancer in my previous life, like I was dancing alongside people who have been put in like dance schools their entire life. Like the under resourced. Like Jupiter's all about being resourced. So I
Mm-hmm.
part of my mission with Venus and Sag is that you can do it if you have enough foresight, if you can like work towards that despite not having the resources.
Almost like working with the impossibilities too,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It helps
Yeah.
push with what you're given. I think
Mm.
that's one thing that like my Venus ultimately really likes to do is like how do you turn something that is really, really humble into something grand. I think that's
Mm.
I want to do with like Venus and Sag.
Oh my God. Now I'm like, now it makes like, now we're on the Sagittarius journey too. I was just like thinking, like, yeah, what was your training or your education before you got here? Anyway, now I'm like, my curiosity mind was just like, wait,
Context.
yeah. So like, what did you, what were you a dancer before this? I mean, that's also very Venusian, and I know you still dance
Yeah,
in some way. And then I know, you do you work out and stuff. I mean, that's also very Martian in the first. It's like, one of those things. But yeah, what was your story in terms of like your own personal whatever you're doing now? Yeah.
yeah. So my story, I guess, getting into my story, is that so grew up, was always super artistic, really loved doodling and drawing, and always had a knack for it. But in throughout junior high school and high school, I really got into dance. And this is like me shouting out to all like the Gaga fans. Like I was such a little monster. I think yeah,
Oh, we love a little monster. I'm a little monster.
I admit it. It's like it's very stereotypical, but like yeah, I just like started grooving and like I really got into dance, and that's what led me to eventually join dance company at my school. And so
Mm.
me and a close childhood friend, like we were the two boys in our team. It was like really really small. We're in a small town, and we were like we were both fighters. We like really like pushed our technique. Like it was an entire childhood of like not being put in dance school, but then suddenly making it to like pretty high positions and like our
Mm-hmm.
being known as like technicians. I think that that's that Mars Venus quality. It's like that pushing in order to refine your art. The work that you
Mm-hmm.
put into your art. Like that was like something that I grew up around. Like my friends were very like me too. They were very like it's like that competition that you get from Mars, but like in for the sake of the art, right?
Mm.
I danced in dance company. I was actually in put in a studio in my junior year of high school. I was in a pre-professional dance company, and I got a scholarship to like a ballet school as well. But that I
Wow.
didn't eventually, end up pursuing because like I didn't have familial support. So like that was where I came from. And after those years of dancing, I applied for this scholarship that was happening in like my high school that got to the state level. You basically had to compete to the state level for dance specifically, and and a few other categories. But I won like basically 20 grand to that basically put me on my path to go to college and become a designer. I think that was like
Oh my God, that's amazing. That's like the Venus in Sag promise of like we're gonna give it to you regardless. I'm definitely I'm sure you work over you you work hard
yeah,
for it
and like
enough.
it was like very much like I had a goal, right? Because like Sagittarius, I had like when I knew that was like how much money was on the line, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna try really really hard to get the scholarship because that would mean like so much agency for me. That would give me so much freedom to choose.
Mm-hmm.
I was still like had a lot of like it's so shitty that people who want to pursue education have to even worry about this. But I was worried financially. I was afraid,
Yeah, of course.
like what it would I be able to afford university?
Yeah.
Things I would probably have to like go to a community college. But no, like because I got the scholarship, it actually gave me permission to say yes to going to university right out of high school. So I
Oh my God, that's amazing.
actually
Yeah.
enjoyed my program. Then I was like, no, I'm gonna not only am I going to study design, I'm also going to minor in Latin in classics because I love classics, which is also another Venus Sag thing, right? Like Venus Sag loves like philosophy, it loves and so it loves sharing and theology and things like that. I love
Mm-hmm.
always really had it had like these deep questions about the universe, and that ultimately led me to become like an occultist and a satirist, somebody who the topics of spirit, which is Jupiterian,
Mm.
to be very forefront in everything that I do and even the things that I create. I think like as a designer, even now, my morals, the things, my ethics, my personal code is still informs the people I connect with, the things I create and want to put out in the world because you know um, it's going to affect people
Mm-hmm.
in a part of their daily lives. So I
Yeah.
make sure I'm doing my due diligence when
Oh
I'm doing
my
that.
God. I love that. All right. I kind of just like want to share your chart, just kind of like refresh my own because you're telling so like such great stories here, and I'm just like in awe and in reverence, and I was like, oh wow, okay. So yeah, a lot of your work do serve the community, and I was just like, yeah, that's so bizarre. And you have a very powerful like your third house, you have like moon in the third and also Jupiter there. That's that's part of like an the third house, ninth house kind of like situation too, in
People
terms of
confuse me with
your
all
interests.
signs.
Yeah, and I was just like, wow, you're very air and just
Just air
fire
sign.
all
It's just air
around.
fire.
Literally, there's no other things.
No
And
other.
I, I was just like, I was like trying to find if there any part like your Jupiter is also like in the terms of Venus. That's also kind of like
Yeah.
interesting observation. I always like try to find like which planet was is in the terms of Venus
The funny
and
thing
try.
about my
Mm-hmm.
Venus Sag is that like one of the assignments that I was assigned during design school is just a funny story, uh,
Mm-hmm.
where we were assigned this assignment where we had to basically visually depict a song.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody chose like these modern songs, like very popular things that people know. I came in with being like, okay, I'm gonna design like a poster for this song, and it's like this Catholic Gregorian canticle. Like, and it's like, oh, this is just telling on myself. I'm just like being pure Sag here, which is like a religious canticle. I love it.
Religious, yeah, I do love that. Oh my god, I am like, I am such a person who appreciate various religion, right? And I think that's also part of like the Sagittarian kind of like, appreciation of, yeah, you can see the like the different storytelling in all kind of like religions, and they are all just like cultural systems in a way, right? It's just
Yeah.
another way of like looking at things and ideologies, blah 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 and so wow. And yeah, I feel like that is the Jupiter in the thrones of Venus was really expressing the third. I was like, I'm gonna submit my assignment is this. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
also very Aquarian, right? It's like I'm the different one. I'm not gonna give the same one like everyone else.
It's so that, like it's
The air sign kind of ideas.
I know soldiers say like, oh yeah, don't stereotype, da, 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 but like because I have like a double up of every single, like every single sign that I do have, there's a
That's
double up.
true. That's true.
I have always like astrology has always made sense to me when I discovered it. I was like, well yeah, I'm like I'm clearly that.
Yeah. When was that? When was that for you?
For what?
When did you discover astrology?
I discovered astrology again. I think we're just gonna be sharing stories this entire podcast because I have many stories. That's a Sag. I wouldn't be a Sag if I didn't. Actually, I got into astrology because of another Sagittarius rising, like this butch lesbian English teacher. You gotta love them. You gotta love your butch lesbian like English teachers.
Yes.
Like we're the gay allies, who
Yeah.
who told you, who believed in you enough that
Who
um
believed in you enough? Yeah.
yeah, she was like
I can see your future.
yeah, she was like such a rebel. And when I was a sophomore in high school, had her for English, and she just didn't follow the curriculum. She didn't care. She was like, no, we're not gonna study the core. You're gonna look at these astrology books, and you're gonna look up your sun, moon, and rising. That's actually how my first introduction to astrology. I was like, really looking back, I was like, wow, that's really wild that that happened, especially in Utah. Because by the way, like, I live in Utah, so there's like
Yeah.
a lot of my peers were like Mormon, they're like LDS, so like they were, some of them were like super into it because like we saw it as like a fun little thing, but some of them were you're like, oh, that's kind of weird that we're looking at our star chart or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was really my first, I would say, real exposure because we've all been exposed to like what our sun sign is, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that
But
was my
yeah, I do feel once you find out your rising and moon, that's when the
absolute.
mind fuckery or mind blown moment. You're like, oh wait, there's more to this, you know?
I think
Yeah.
that was the visceral feeling I experienced when I discovered like yeah, both my, especially my moon. I think like as much as a Sagittarian I am, I do have like this deeply aqua. It's like my sun and ruler is there, my moon is there. But
Mm-hmm.
I have like this deep aqua. I mean, like I'm wearing all black, So
I
it's
mean, yeah, Libra is also like the place where Saturn is exalted, right? So yeah.
it's like you talk to me, you get like the jovial qualities, especially when I'm. But for the most part, I do have like a Saturn trend about me, which
And
is
I was also thinking about how like, you know, I think I want to go there of just like the idea of like the all black, like it's an artist thing too, I feel, right? Isn't it?
I
It's
would say,
like, I mean, if it's some certain designers, whatever, like they do love like an all black or like, you know, situation. I mean, I love the aesthetics, the all black aesthetics.
yeah,
I yeah.
there's there's something deeply Saturnine about that. Like I've noticed
Hmm.
this as a trend throughout the creative community and like the just like my own personal um, design education. Like when I entered my program, everyone like this is like the even like the stereotype where like oh art students enter the art building wearing normal clothes, they all leave the art building wearing black.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's like totally because I think there's something really fundamentally deeply anti-solar, very Saturnian about the higher echelons of art because it's very much like oh you don't want to stand out too much, you don't want things to clash, you basically wear black because it goes with everything, right? It's like
Hmm.
it's not standing out, it's being almost like a perfect vessel or container for
Hmm.
you know there's a lot to be said there, but I think there's uh I mean I also just like it, I think it's a cool color.
Yeah, yeah, it
You
is.
know,
It is. It is. I love it all black aesthetics. I sometimes pull it
but
off
it's
too, but
totally
not all the times. But yeah, I do love it whenever I do it. So that's also part of it.
balance.
So yeah,
I
I'm like kind of want to go into, sorry, what were you saying? Sorry.
I was like saying, yeah, it's just a balance thing too for me. I don't want anything to like, if I buy an article of clothing, yeah, I want to be able to wear it with everything else. I don't want to have to, you know. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I was kind of like thinking in terms of because it's Venus and Sag episode, and I was like, all right, maybe I should also ask you about like what is your personal spirituality or philosophy or life kind of like embodiment in a way. Like what do you believe in? Yeah, because it's like belief system is a Sagittarius question, right? So yeah, what do you I've never asked this in any other Venus sign, I feel, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's perfect for this episode. I think it's kind of complicated. I don't think I have the vernacular to say everything I could possibly say, but I will try. I think
Mm-hmm.
my beliefs, I think belief should be something that's super malleable. You know, I think like and should evolve as you grow as a person. So Jupe, right? You know, like
you you should like stop right now. But
but
that's true.
I think where I stand now is that in terms of my worldview, I think astrology obviously informs a large part of how I move about the world. I think the way that I engage with my spirituality is deeply relational as it when it comes to the planets, where I think that we live in a world where so many things are conscious that we are not aware of, and I think
Mm-hmm.
being able to stay tapped in to the voice of nature, I think like a big part of where how I practice even now in astrology is just encouraging people to start a conversation with the universe, right? I think
Mm.
the language of astrology allows you, it's been the foremost most important tool in my growth spiritually as a person. I believe it's given me an interface that has really shaken me to my core of like my previously quite like materialist uh,
Mm.
view, where like you know because you know I have the Aquarian side of me that's very like objective. You know, I'm a man of science. Like I believe in things that have systematic rules.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but then when you pry, you know, traditional astrology really did it for me, where you see the continuity, you know, the continuity of this practice of astrology and the great minds who like you know developed the modern systems of science that we are familiar with today, like you know astronomy. We would not be here without astrologers, the work of astrologers. That's the first thing that humankind did, you know, in ancient days. Like we looked up to the sky. Right? I think that's
Mm-hmm.
so something so primal, so primordial. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Astrology just gives us simply a tool, a language to engage with, to have a conversation with. And to me,
Mm.
astrology talks to me every single day. And if you're a person who's an astrologer, you know what I'm talking about. We're tuning into the moment, looking at uh, the inception of any single event and seeing that seed that
Mm-hmm.
power into full, patterns of fate, in your own life. I think that is something that is so rich and so valuable. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just what I believe. My belief is nature itself. It's the world. It is, I'm quite pantheist. Everything, most things are probably conscious, things are you didn't think were conscious are probably conscious. Like, and it's talking to you all the time if you pay attention, and
Nice, nice.
it's
Yeah.
essentially what I believe. Like, most people like put a label. I don't know how to put a label to things. I believe it's too complicated.
I I love that. And I think it also very much speak to your Aquarius and moon, and like, the third. And I do feel like the third house has a way of like the intimacy of the divine, compared to, the ninth house is more of like the bigger picture relationship with the divine. And I think it's like, yeah, it's kind of like your chart ruler in the third, co-president of the moon is, yeah, that feels quite loud through that
Yeah, like a rejoicing.
worldview.
That's
Yeah.
a huge part of who I am. As much as, like, my sect light rules my ninth, like as with all Sagittarians, well, like, not everybody, unless you're only if you're diurnal, right? I'll say that.
You're diurnal. So how do you feel about, yeah, okay, go ahead. Sorry, I'm like interrupting you. Um what you were saying, sorry.
Um, yeah. What was your point? About my
I
ninth house.
wanted to ask you more about like the diurnal nature of your Venus, in terms of your, do you consider Venus your, I mean obviously it is your benefic out of sec, right? And maybe it also explains why you're like, oh my god, it seems like an overworking Venus. No, just but like there are so, but I was also thinking about how has that works out for you, because I always have that question, just because by the nature of my chart, I have kind of like a, I don't say fucked up, but like I don't think my benefic and offset and out of sec is um kind of just like, they, for me they're both plus minuses in a way. Because I have like Venus in Aries, but it's still in the fifth. It's retrograde, blah blah blah. But then I still have Jupiter in Libra, but then I'm in a nocturnal sec. So it's like, for me, Jupiter and Venus are always just like, they bring me the goods, but they also bring me some weird shit sometimes.
Yeah,
But then I always wonder, people who, like, for example, for you, do you feel like, is Venus and Jupiter for you in terms of the quality of the benefic? Is it very different, or do you feel Venusian things are harder for you compared to the Jovian things? Or, I mean, sometimes it's hard to discern as well, right? But yeah,
yeah.
based on your relationship as of now.
I would say, like, Venus has always been difficult for me, and I think, like,
Mm,
you have I have a Venus in the first house, with my malefic. Like, they're both out of scent, right?
mm,
And they don't necessarily have any particular dignity to them. So it's been a struggle my entire life to reconcile those aspects of myself, because sometimes they can be quite, like Venus is, um, applying to conjoin my 12th house ruler. A lot of times, like I said, like there's like a self-destructive tendency to them, where
mm,
for the sake of my art, I won't sleep. um,
mm.
um,
Yeah, because I remember I was texting you at like 1 a.m. and like, and then you replied. I was like, wait, I am awake at this moment just because I was doing something last night.
yeah, yeah. I think, I one of the struggles I've had with Venus is that her restless nature in Sag is always, it's very restless.
Mm,
Sag is already kind of restless, but with the Mars, I think it's particularly, like, impatient. Like, it can't stay put. I would say
mm-hmm,
he's always looking for, the next thing. Like I said, like the next project, the
mm-hmm,
next, task, or the next connection. And so for me, it's been a relationship, uh, of having to learn how to take in, rather than,
mm,
I produce so much, and I realize, uh, there were key times where I should have been really allowing myself to, like, take in more and just
mm,
appreciate. Because, like, I'm a very, I have like a perfectionistic trend, to the way that I look at myself. So I really am a perfectionist, and I try to, like, really create like high quality work, but oftentimes that leads me to like these darker spaces of like self-criticism and not being able
Mm-hmm.
to enjoy the actual good or the art that I've produced thus far, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like the flaws or how I could do better, or even, and sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you need to be able to sit in a space where you can take in. And
Mm.
the primary struggle I've had with my Venus, it's like my 11th house ruler. So
Yeah.
I do I am involved in a lot of social settings. That dry quality Venus shows that have been key periods in my life where there have been really major falling outs with like the groups that I've once identified with, or
Mm.
friend groups, things like that. I've had to take a martial knife to them because of
Yeah.
where I was growing, or what trajectory I was um, headed, and also what I fundamentally believed shifted. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's the loss that I deal a lot with, like the Venus Pluto aspect of like losing groups that were once attached to my sense of identity,
Mm.
sense of like myself as a person in community, also as an artist, because so much the things we draw on as artists is like the connections, the relationships, the things that you relate to, what you're surrounded by, what you're surrounded by informs the art that you make, I believe. So
Yeah, that's true.
I think like that I've gone through multiple like crises, like Pluto, right? Like crises of relationship, where
Mm-hmm.
a mental shift in a relationship because of an underlying shift in faith, or knowing deep down the trajectory for my life is headed is not conducive to
Yeah.
the lifestyle that group leads, right? Uh,
Yeah.
I think that is like the quality that I see in my own Venus.
I love that. I love that. I feel like that's definitely a mirror of like, yeah, 11th house topics of like, is this part of my dream or is this other people's dream? Right. It's also,
Yeah,
you also have sun, like you also have like a
exactly.
sun.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like a sun, like it's like Libra, it's like a fallen sun in the 11th, which is kind of interesting because I feel like I have had similar experiences, but like, yeah, I never thought about it that way. But I've never thought it like deeper that way. And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. It's really like knowing that like, okay, I'm no longer aligned with this, right? It's and having to come into a sense of like that loss of communities, etc. Yeah, it's um one something I do feel for me, like my 11th house of Jupiter is always like very good in the sense of like I remember my first friendship breakup was just a few years ago. And that was so hard for me. And I was like, wait, Shahir, you're like, that was your first friendship breakup in your 20 plus years of life. You're good. And I was like,
yeah.
which is kind of funny for my own personal revelation as well. But yeah, I do feel okay. So that Venus expression of like having to realign yourself, and I mean going through that like rebirth process of like self-identity in a way to being in the first house, and kind of like reframing and reshaping that. Um I was also like thinking about your the other ruler for Venus house is like, the sixth house, right? Which is, the house of health or like the house of illness, etc. But also a sense of like, for me, it's more about like the Taurian nature of like receptivity that you kept on kind of like talking about as well. Um, yeah, that is perhaps quote unquote also like a more difficult place to access as that rising naturally, but then also as Venus there, Venus can't see the Taurus house as well, so it's like Venus like I don't know, it's like, yeah,
It's
how do you
the
feel about that?
aversion,
Yeah,
right? Hence the aversion between those signs, right? Because I think about
yeah,
the signs that are reversed to the signs that are reversed to Sag are the ones that, like, I mean, this is just aversions in general, but they just like they don't see each other, and like their goals
yeah,
and beliefs, like Tauri, like love me my Taurians. I don't understand Taurus because I have a lot of people like I have a lot of like Taurus placements in my family. Like everyone's so Earth, but me, I'm the only one that like doesn't have a single Earth placement. And it's like it's so like Taurians love to like stay in one place and have like all the things that they like in one place. And I'm always like going out and like moving about. Like I can't sit still, right? Like I think that's like, the fundamental difference. And
yeah,
so with my sixth house, we're like, oh, your work and like the things you need to do to live in a society, like do like go to work to get a wage, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You design work, or do your art is pays your bills, etc. You need to,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can't just leave when you can't just leave. You just gotta sit there and do the work, right?
Yeah.
It's like a struggle with like my sixth house, and because it's very like dopamine hungry, so it's always
Mm.
exciting. And sometimes like my sixth house work, and this is where like the peregrine nature, it's like it can get a little restless and gets and make me really really sad because I can't do anything exciting because I'm busy doing creative work I don't necessarily am like in love with,
Yeah, it's like a such a it can feel too mundane or like routine in a way that's just like
routine.
it's like it's like
Yeah,
what is this? This is not my life.
no,
Like
yeah, and so you gotta grow up, you gotta adult, you gotta do what you gotta do to survive. But I think that's like the
I
struggle,
I
like
know.
the six ruler.
It's yeah, yeah. I always love that idea of like, yeah, like the signs being averse because I've been trying to explore that more actually, even through this series. I've been realizing I've been asking a lot of questions through that lens. I'm trying to write up something about that actually. Um, so yeah, thank you for illuminating that and that sense of aversion
One
and
of
for
those.
reals.
They really,
Yeah,
they're like a thing. Like at first,
yeah.
oh, but like the more you look at it, it makes sense, even just like how the zodiac. But I think that's like another topic we can go into some other time, because I know I'll go down like a hole, because I have a lot of thoughts about aversions, because I just know. I personally, in my chart, if you look at my like everything sees, I think that's what's unique. One thing that I do bring out that's a little bit unique about my chart is that like I don't have aversions. Like everything essentially sees everything, you know.
Oh, that's true because they're all in that fire and air.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
fire and air, so like they really do have this capacity to like see each other and interface.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I know my demons, like I know what they are. I can see
yeah,
them very very clearly, versus like sometimes I'll interact with somebody who has like a natal aversion, and there are certain areas of their life where they're like, oh yeah, I never thought about that, but like that really does happen, and I just like never notice it. I'm like, but in the background, even the things that generally are not noticed, I do notice, because they're like,
yeah. That's true. That's true. Because everything kind of like see each other. Oh my God, that's kind of bizarre. I love that. I wow, that your chart is very different in that sense. As all charts are too, like so special. Um, so yeah, what else about Venus and Sag? What about like your relationship to like divination stuff too? Like, do you do any? Because I obviously Sagittarius is one of the sign of like the prophetess, kind of like as Nicki Minaj would say. Um, love her. So yeah, what kind of divination do you do any sort of divination besides astrological stuff?
yeah, of course. Actually, that was a major shift in my spiritual journey. In that
Mm,
I first got into anything spiritual or esoteric, it was my first love was tarot, and a lot of people in the astrologer space don't know that. And I think it's true for a lot of us, but it was
yeah, it's mine too. Yeah, I got in.
tarot
Yeah.
first, right? Like because like tarot is just such an amazing tool that that once you work with it, it like it really does. And this is why the things I say about astrology, it's informed by my tarot practice. I,
Mm-hmm.
like there's this story aspect to tarot that you don't necessarily get up front with
Mm-hmm.
astrology. I think it's like, oh, you can immediately tap in because it's pictorial, right? You lay out a spread and it paints out a scene. It tells you a little story,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah.
And so I think that I took to that really, really easily because of my natural inclinations. So I would say, yeah, tarot is like a huge part of my practice, and this is something I would like to remark about. Even the third house in my chart, where I believe that uh, third house is third house space is really, really intimate, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a space of local spiritual cults. It's the place of ritual. It's the place of putting into praxis your belief.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's going before the goddess.
Yeah.
It is really that, and because we're talking about Venus, it is that sacred space underneath the horizon. Right?
Mm.
Space is. is very local. It is very intimate. It's that place that you constantly return to recenter and recollect. You know,
That's true. Yeah.
I find that to me, that was tarot for me for many years before, and it still is before I came to astrology. Like it was always a place where I could come back. Like it's like the moon rejoices on the third. It's like it's like cyclical, right? Oh, you
Mm-hmm.
another reading, you see where things are. You see the progress of like, and you come across another bump in the road. What do you do, right? Like, and
Yeah.
tarot was such a huge tool for me to survive some of like the truly some of the pits of my life. Some of the kind of um, uh, darkest parts of darkest valleys along in your journey, right? I think that was
Mm-hmm.
a tool for me to be able to navigate and see the road ahead. I think that Sagittarian need to
I
see,
know.
otherwise you feel hopeless. Like I think
I
that
know.
yeah, I think that tarot and now astrology was able to provide that for me, and I think that's why you have
Mm-hmm.
so many sages really take to like divination. And if you go to Norwalk, there's like always like a cluster of sages kind of hanging out, right? So us sages,
Yeah.
we love astrology because it does
Yeah. Because, yeah, and I think it's like when we're talking about the Sagittarius nature of like, that's also part of the divination and the third house. I love that, all the illumination. And that's also how you cultivate hope, as you were saying too. Yeah, that's a way too, because it's like, yeah, we might have the foresight, but we also need like an aim of like, all right, it's this, like, this is a story, this is the potential outcome, whatever. I mean, like, it's like their sense of focus in terms of like, obviously there's fluidity in doing divination work, but there's also like a sense of like, oh, this is the story I'm potentially going to be embarking on. It's like yeah, and it is a very much a seer
I
tool
think
for me
diurnal,
usually. Yeah.
one thing that's often not mentioned about the diurnal expression of Venus is that, and you get this a lot with like morning star Venus people too. If you look at
Mm-hmm.
the Venus and her phase, because like my Venus is technically in its evening star phase
Mm-hmm.
because it's in relationship to the sun,
Sun,
but
yeah.
like diurnal expressions of Venus, you often get like that. You have to go reach for it, right? I think especially with Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
you got to go reach for the gold. If you have that bigger picture in mind, you go out and get it rather than like almost gravitationally attracting it, because people use the words attraction and like magnet.
Yeah.
And it's like that is very true with like what Venus represents. But I think for me in my own life, it's like less so that I magnetize. That becomes like a result later down the line. But like
Yes, exactly.
it's like no, you go out and you get it. You go out and like you set the goal and you go out and you get it, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's true. That's true. That's very fiery too, because yeah, I feel
very
like,
fire, very fire
in
Venus.
terms of very fiery, very sash, and very like mutable, and kind of like, knowing that things need to change in a way for me to kind of like achieve whatever quote unquote those things are. And also like about the yeah, it is yeah, you attract it as a result. I very much relate to that in the sense of like, yeah, because sometimes people say that like, yeah, Venus is like, about receptivity and kind of just like being magnetizing. You pull it in, but I'm like, yeah, but I only could pull it in if I put myself out there
Exactly.
and
Yeah,
and
exactly.
blaze it through and burn through like the way, and I can pull the people in to watch it.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So that's also part of the journey here.
Yeah,
Okay, is there any other things that Venus and Sagittarius that you feel like, oh, you feel like personally called to tell even more?
I
Um,
think it's just one of passion. I think like just
mm,
with Sag, it's so much about passion. And I sound like a walking stick, because like who isn't passionate? Like I always have like those like self-checking. It's like, am I uniquely unique in this case? Where like, oh, I'm very passionate about X, Y, Z, but like fundamentally, that Venus and Sag, it has a quality of passion to it, where it's like it's
mm,
genuinely, it loves to connect and learn about other people's passions as well. Like I care, like how I move about in like my social groups is like I care like where you are in your journey, and I care about like talking about the things that you're passionate about. Like that's the things that's how I socialize. It's how like I'm always like,
mm-hmm,
oh yeah, like what are you doing now? Where, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
Where do you want to go? Tell me about your goals, your ambitions. Like that's always like something that like I myself talking about, like with like the people closest into my life and like the ones that are close to me, like we're really able to riff on that and
Yeah.
share because it's like you motivate each other. It's like it's that self-motivation quality.
Mm-hmm.
Like saying yes to yourself and your friends saying yes to you. It's like, yeah, you want to do that? Go get it. Like go do
That's
that.
true. That's very true. That's very, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that way. That is the Sagittarius energy of like, yeah, it's like it's not just you're dreaming your own, you're also like visioning for other people as well, or even giving space and making space for other people to also like
Those
dream about
conversations,
like what their targets are.
you're able to talk to people and you're able to, I find so many times, especially in my professional networks, um,
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to, throughout those conversations where I'm amongst peers, we're sharing the things that inspire us, the things that we're passionate about or we're excited about. Like, so like, I think Venus and Sag is very much like, what are you excited about right now? Tell me about what you're excited about right now. And then we'll like share and have conversation. And then,
Mm-hmm.
and then from that, there's the Jupiterian, like, oh, actually, you need that to get to your goal. I actually have that. I actually have this thing. You'd probably love that resource. It's a resource thing. I think
It is a
ultimately
resource, yeah.
it's resource
Yeah.
other knowing each other's stories so that you can see how you can be like one stop on their path, to get to.
Yeah, that's
I
true. That's
think
true.
that's what I aim to be. Like for example, I love
Because
being
you there could also be a place for you to help out, right? It's like, yeah, maybe I know someone, or maybe like, oh, I know of this kind of like, it's like a part of like, I feel like Sagittarius agenda, I feel too, it's kind of just like signposting or like signaling people to where the direction they are going. Yeah.
totally,
That's a
yeah,
gift. Yeah.
and be able
Yeah.
to put that out because I think there's a pointy quality about Sagittarius where it knows what it wants, it knows what it's aiming for, uh,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's it's not like mercurial in that it's like specific, it's like a very specific item. It's usually
Mm-hmm.
a concept. It's like like the thing that you're aiming for is
I
a
want to feel like this. I want to be this far.
exactly. It's so I think those are kind of like my final remarks about Venus and
I love that.
is that
Yeah.
Venus in Sag is a very passionate placement.
Yeah.
It's striving for something, it's aiming for something. And
Mm-hmm.
this is not necessarily um, a planet that's like its first task item, that's like its first line of like its first significations, right? But I think
Mm-hmm.
that makes it unique, and I'm very happy with my Venus. I wouldn't have it any other way. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't without my Venus and Sag. So just
Yeah.
hardships that I've come
Oh
across.
my God. I love that. Yeah, I feel that is, that is relationship, Venus, true passion, true shared passion, or even overlapping passion, or even very diverse passion, like passion too, right? That's the beauty of a
I'm sure
double-bodied sign. It's like it's fine if you're not in my team, like, but do you, It's like I want you to realize your thing.
exactly sharing what you're
Yeah.
about, the things that really get your fire going, right? Like the things
Yeah.
that encourage you to be better, to be a better person,
Mm-hmm.
more compassionate. Because like I think about my relationship with astrology and how it's ultimately helped me in my journey, in my path to become a more compassionate person, to be
Mm-hmm.
more a person more capable of love and also of being loved, right? And I
Yeah,
think
I love that. Yeah.
those things when and it's honest. I think like that's the thing about we people forget about Jupiter. Jupiter always strives to be honest, I think like Venus and Sag can get it's like the typical foot and mouth, like
Yeah, yeah.
oh I accidentally said that, whoops. I mean
Oops. It's like it's hilarious though. It's usually funny. And
like,
true.
I can't believe I admitted that, or I can't believe I said that out loud, or I can't, it's very just like, good spirits. I think
It's like whoop.
it's being in good spirits and also having good,
Yeah.
sometimes one struggle that I've had historically is that like, am I able to be in groups where I feel like I'm being held in good faith? Because oftentimes
Mm.
when people, when um, you're a Sag and like people don't owe anything to you and things like that, they're gonna, if you say something that may not be like, you know, kosher and like you didn't mean it like that, but it came out the wrong way, you know, sometimes you can get like crucified for that. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm very like aware of how people perceive me. So like when I accidentally do those things, like fuck, like what if like people take that the wrong way and they hate me or something like that. But I think that's the thing with like Jupiter. It's like it wants to be, my Venus always wants to be 100% unadulterated. It wants to
Mm-hmm.
be 100% pure, but that I can only be that way when I feel like I'm being held in good faith. That people
Yeah, of
are not gonna,
course. You need a kind of like containers for that as well.
people are
Yeah.
not going to assume malevolence of me because
Mm-hmm.
you know it cares more about the intention, which is Jupiter, rather than
Mm-hmm.
what was actually said, which is like Mercury.
Yeah,
Okay? You know,
that's true.
I think that's where you know like you have you know situations where like you know like Venus like in a Mercury ruled sign like in Virgo, like sometimes like those they're very contrary to like a Venus in Sag where it's like very like you know like instead of holding you like to exactly what you said, it's like no, like I understand what you mean though, right? Like
Yeah.
I enjoy to relate. I care more about what people's intentions are rather than what they actually, because sometimes like the things that people actually say, it's sometimes can just come from a place of ignorance, and ignorance isn't always malevolent, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
you just don't know, and
You
it's
just
the
don't
Jupiter.
know.
You just don't know, and you're like, oh shoot, you know, like, and you open up a conversation, you give people enough room, you give them enough
Mm-hmm.
space to grow, to learn, right? Like I think that's what I care about. I care about like people learning,
Oh
people
my God.
being able to learn, we're being able to grow as people, and
That's true. I agree with that.
I think that's essentially what my Venus tries to do. It just tries to be honest.
Oh my God. I feel like you have successfully did that definitely through this episode too. It's like
So I think
I can definitely feel it. So all right. Oh my God. With that, to be
I,
continued, right? With all Venus and Sag
there's
stories.
always
It's like it's not yet.
there's always more with Sag. You know, like we can go on for like 3 hours, and but that would be too much. So
Oh my God, yeah, the Jovian excess. So, okay, thank you so much, Hugh, for sharing all this Venusian, Venus and Sagittarius insights with us. I'm pretty sure there are people out there who would relate to it, to this on very multiple levels, or the people in their lives with Venus and Sagittarius. So, thank you so much.
thanks for having me on. It was a
All
pleasure.
right. Thank you everyone for watching, and see you in the next episodes or catch the previous ones in the meantime. Bye bye.